You're listening to Conservation Connection. I'm Chance.
I'm Sarah Catherine.
We're a husband and wife team running an environmental education nonprofit that's focused on connecting students to their environment.
Each week, here on Conservation Connection, we do just that by introducing you to the groundbreaking science and conservation work that's happening every day across the globe.
We talk to professionals working to protect our planet and ask them about their career,
Their current projects,
their wild and crazy stories from the field,
and everything in between.
This episode is a collaboration with the Sun Valley Forum in Sun Valley, Idaho.
The Sun Valley Forum is an intergenerational meeting of forward-thinking professionals that come from a diverse range of disciplines.
These experts are on the cutting edge of what's happening in the fight for our future, and they've all come together at the Sun Valley Forum to share ideas and to collaborate on solutions for a greener tomorrow.
Let's get to the show.
Alrighty guys, welcome to another episode of Conservation Connection. We are so excited to be back at the Sun Valley Forum here in Sun Valley, Idaho. I'm incredibly excited to be sitting down with Jill Tidman. She is the executive director of the Redford Center, and we're going to dive deep into who they are, what they do, and all the amazing projects they have going on.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for making time for us on the first day of the forum. Why don't we just start with what is the Redford Center?
Sure. The Redford Center, we're an independent nonprofit organization that uses storytelling through film to drive environmental solutions. So we really look to the film as a tool, but our mission as an organization is to help address the environmental crisis we're in.
And how long have you been with the Redford Center?
I have been working with the organization since 2005 and in this role since 2012.
And when was it founded?
2005.
Yeah, so the very beginning, right? I thought that was the answer.
I will say, though, it's really it's a culmination, an evolution, if you will, of Robert Redford's environmental activism over many decades. He was very instrumental in the 70s in being an advocate for the environment and was working a lot of different ways to do that, both locally in the state of Utah and also at the federal level, was doing a lot of convening work. So one of the, I'd say, hallmarks of the way that Mr. Redford approached the work has always been bringing people together. A lot of times people that don't always, get in the same room together and trying to find the common ground and really move everything forward from a different place. And so that spirit is very much part of the work that we still do today and the kind of driving grassroots support so that we can build a bigger base and have a louder voice and more influence. So all of those elements and the solutions piece, the solutions focus is very much alive in our work still. So
yeah, that's definitely something that we, as another nonprofit organization, really strive towards, is that collaborative sense of it's so much more than like, hey, I have the solution, you should do this. It boils down to like, these are the people that this affects. How do we work together to get to a mutually agreeable solution? Because that's the only way you're going to make progress. I mean, in anything in life, really, but it particularly with sticky environmental problems is by bringing people together who would not ordinarily sit down around a table together.
Yeah, I mean, it's so critical to try to depolarize and humanize this work because it really does affect us all. The quote that I often like to say around that is a Redford family quote and value is that we don't all have to have the same motivations to want the same outcomes. And that's
I love that.
Really, really
Writing
true.
that down now.
Yeah. We forget that we're all really going after the same thing and get kind of caught up in the why of it. So yeah, I think there's big opportunity if you can stay focused in that direction and work through the differences and think of the differences as opportunities to learn and come to a different outcome together.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Redford Center works with environmental impact filmmaking in a couple of ways, right? They both support other projects and have projects that they're working on directly. Is that correct?
Yeah, so historically, the organization was founded by Robert Redford and his son James. James was a documentarian and a committed environmentalist as well. He and I produced 3 long-form documentaries for the organization between 2007 and 2017, actually. And we were getting ready to do our 4th one on the theme of nature connection, and really trying to help us all remember that, we are part of this bigger thing and totally interdependent. And there's a lot of opportunity for us to have more time outside, have more connection with our life source, and just remember that we're not really apart from it.
Which I think gets lost so often, right? That we're like, nature exists outside and we exist here. And so there's this division. And I love the idea of a film that's focused around like, hey, by the way, we are not separate from nature. We are part of nature. And that's something that more awareness needs to be brought to.
Yeah, we've just designed a world that it makes it really easy to forget that connection. And then we've become more and more habituated to live indoors. There's really some profound data out there around how much time we spend indoors, which is 95% of our time. And kids, not having the opportunity to be playing outdoors these days the way that they did. And it's challenging for us as we're trying to recommit every day to safeguarding the planet. When you don't have that direct relationship, it's out of sight, out of mind.
Which is all comes back to the role of environmental impact filmmaking, right? Is that if you're going to spend your time inside, maybe you should watch a film about outside while you're on your couch watching Netflix, right?
That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about it that way. But if you're watching anything, yeah, I mean, why not? I think the big opportunity with the films that we make and support is the opportunity to feel more encouraged about the future. We know that there's a lot of really scary data out there, and definite day-to-day experiences that we have never had before. And if you're not in the work, it's very hard to know the progress that's happening, or to see where we're winning, or who's leading this, and how communities are solving their problems. And so that's the work we try to support, that type of storytelling, so that when you are seeing a film or a short, you're not just understanding the issue more deeply, but you're understanding what can be done about it.
And what is currently being done about it, right?
Exactly.
I love that. And that's, I feel like we're all on the same wavelength here, because that's exactly what we try to do with the podcast, is not just to be doom and gloom, but to be like, hey, there are solutions. People are actively working on this. You can also work on it alongside the people that are already doing it, as a way to encourage people to get outside and to get involved, as opposed to this paralyzing hopelessness that happens. We had one of the awesome podcasts we did was with Molly Kawahata, and I'm
The Scale of Hope.
The Scale of Hope. Thank you.
Patagonia film.
Yeah, it was a Patagonia film, and her whole messaging is that there is psychological data that says that when you talk about these bad things, it's paralyzing. It causes people to shut down, disengage, and not do anything about it. But if you come in with this message of hope, it gets people excited, gets them out, and gets them working on solutions and implementing solutions that we already have. And I just love to see other media groups that share that ideal, because I think it's really what's going to turn the tides.
There's even data on the other side around where we get our strength and courage from. There's a professor out of Berkeley, Dasher Keltner, who just wrote a new book about awe and went around the world, 25,000 people, I think he surveyed, to really understand like the main causes or reasons that people feel awe. And the number one is seeing moral courage in other people.
That's awesome.
So when you see someone on screen taking action, fighting for their community, having success, that's where we also get that strength and motivation that feels so missing right now.
It gives you hope, and you're like, oh, wow, they're doing that. I can do that. Or at least it inspires you to do something like that.
And even if you're not doing it at the same scale, allows you to do, it builds a relationship with the environment, right? And allows you to feel empowered to do small things in your own life that maybe aren't going to change the whole course of the globe, but maybe can impact your community or even your household.
Well, and I think we get tripped up around scale. I think the scale of the problem and the stories that we hear about the future are so overwhelming, particularly when you compare them to like the day-to-day actions that you're being told to do. Right. There's such a gap there that I understand why people would be like, what does it really matter? And I think it all matters right now. Every single decision, it's an all of the above strategy right now, because I love to talk about this metaphor of if you're steering a ship toward an iceberg, let's say, and you just turn 1 degree, 2 degree, 3 degree, you're going to end up in a different place. You won't be in the same place as if you'd go 180, but you will still end up in a different place. And so I do think all those little things matter and add up and are helpful right now, even if they're local, even if they're in your family or in your school or in your community. It doesn't have to, you don't have to be a world leader to have an impact right now.
Completely agree. And I oftentimes think that the most important things people can do are at a local scale, right? Local elections, knowing who's on your public utilities commission, or, just being informed and involved at literally the small scale is what makes the larger scale change possible. And I think that that's a really valuable lesson to keep hammering home.
And I think it can feel hopeless, obviously, as like one person trying to do something and you see other people not doing the same or doing the opposite of what you're trying to do better. But I think just keeping the perspective and like remembering there are other people like me trying to do the same thing. And if enough of us just keep doing it, maybe we'll inspire these other people who aren't doing it yet. But like you said, even just a 3-degree change in the other direction is such a big change, even if it doesn't seem like it.
Especially over the course of a lifetime, right? This isn't a change that you make for a week. And maybe it's something that you do for a while and then it falls off, but you keep coming back to it, like meditation, right? The whole point is the practice, not the end result. So coming back to small changes over a lifetime makes a big difference.
Yeah, and this is not something that we're going to need to stop doing at any point. And so it's a consciousness, right? It's the consciousness that comes with that action that is going to, show up somewhere maybe surprising at some point, because you're still in that mind frame of having, a lower footprint or however you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So going back a little bit to your background, how did the Redfords find you? I'm assuming maybe they knew you before, I don't know, but I want to hear that story for sure. And just like your background before you were with the Redford Center.
Sure, yeah. So I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and, was well educated, public school, but I got a good education. But it wasn't until I went to college, the University of Vermont, that I really started to learn about what was happening with the planet. And I was one of those people where it just like, it hit me in a foundational way. And I sort of thought, it's like, oh, now that I know this, I think this is what I have to be part of, dealing with. And so I was not sure how to do that, because this was, age myself, 30 years ago, and it was environmental studies. It was very theoretical. It was not, you couldn't get like an energy efficiency degree and all the things that we can do now. It was like, we need to deal with this because this is coming and now we know, and what do we do? So I ended up trying a lot of things, and I went to, started with green architecture. And then I realized I didn't want to be an architect. And went into green business for about 7 years and realized that corporate world is not where I want to live. And was working in local government at the time when I met the Redfords, because I was brought on to help them produce the first mayor's conference that they did on climate mitigation back in 2005. So this was when there was a really progressive mayor in Salt Lake City, Rocky Anderson. And he and Mr. Redford felt like there was an opportunity to bring other mayors to Sundance, to the Sundance Mountain Resort, where the birthplace of a lot of the Redford family's initiatives happen. And so I was working with the organization that was connected to the mayors. So we were brought on to make sure that we could fill the room. And then I was specifically tasked with producing the event. And as part of that, we started filming some of the mayors and their stories, and did that for 3 years. And by the third year of the event, we decided that the mayors were ready for a deeper cut. So we went down to Texas to tell a story of a group of mayors that came together to fight a bunch of coal plants that were slated to be built. They were going to choke out Waco, Texas, and 19 of them all, it's a lot. And so the mayors and the business people and the faith groups and the ranchers and the environmentalists, all these unlikely partners got together and made some progress. So we made a film called Fighting Goliath. It was my first film. And we made it for the mayors for this event. And it was unbelievable the value that the movement groups found in the film. So they started using it, NRDC, Sierra Club, Public Citizen, all this local community groups fighting coal plants in their neighborhoods, because there were, at the time, it was like 200 plus coal projects that were slated for construction in the U.S. Wow. And so the film ended up becoming this incredible organizing and educational tool. And it created the model for the organization. We all recognized that this was an opportunity for storytelling through film to start connecting the dots for people and for the movement, and bringing more opportunity in for action. So that is how I got involved and started making films.
So you didn't have anything to do with film before getting involved with the Redford Center?
No, I mean, I've always been a writer. So, before I took this role, I would write short fiction, just frankly as an escape from all the bad news I was dealing with on the day-to-day in my jobs. And so it was unbelievable for me to see that I could use storytelling and merge storytelling with my environmental, commitment and passion, and sort of have it all line up like that. So that's probably why I've been around so long with the family. Yeah. Like, this is my lane.
Yeah, everything else is like, that's not right, that's not right, that's not right. And you're like, oh, this feels good.
Which is such an important thing to highlight, that it's not this linear path of like, do high school, then go to college to get a degree in some form of sustainability, whatever. And then you do that for 45 years, and then you retire, and then blah, blah, blah. It's like, you got to try things. You have to be willing to have this self-awareness to say, oh, I don't want to do green architecture. This is not fulfilling in the way that I thought it was. Maybe we'll try this. Oh, I also don't do well in the corporate world, which like I would be eaten alive in, like I get that 100%. And to have the courage and the knowing yourself well enough to say, this is not working. It's a good cause, but it's not a good fit. So let's keep working until we find the right fit. And then also knowing yourself well enough to know, oh, this is the thing. And I love that it falls into place that your passion for storytelling that you were using as an escape sort of melds with your professional aspirations to make the world a better place. Because that is literally, since I was a child, what I have told people do is to take what you care about and take what you're good at and put them together. And that's the secret sauce. It's how change happens, and it's how people live fulfilling lives. I just love to hear a story like yours where through years and years of trial and error, you've come to what is kind of your role in the world. And to see your first film turn around and have such a huge impact and get picked up by such huge organizations, it just had to feel like such an amazing, I don't even know how to describe it, but this is right, things clicking into place moment.
Yeah, it's like you're in the flow. In a way.
That Zen state where like things are working.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that kind of crooked, I always talk about it as a crooked line. Actually, it's funny you mentioned that. But I think what happens on the journey is that you pick up things that are useful to you when you always, but like now I feel really grateful for knowing a lot about green business and knowing a lot about green architecture. And when I see those stories come in, I have a foundational knowledge set that is really helpful. And my understanding, my systems-based training around environmental solutions is always at play in my work right now. So it's not like it was even a wrong turn. It was just like, additive in ways I never really expected. And it shows up still and surprises me.
Totally understand that, because one of the reasons that Sarah Catherine and I decided on podcasting as the medium that we wanted to sort of enter this world is because we used to help a friend in the Florida Keys when we lived down there DJ weddings. So I felt like we had a pretty solid understanding of how to set up microphones and sound equipment. Like, I get how this works. And so doing that as a side gig while we were working in the Florida Keys turned into a really important skill set to launch this podcast, and the thousands of people that have listened to the stories on this podcast owe it in part to the fact that we used to set up sound equipment for weddings, and so it is incredibly valuable to always be looking for what skills am I gaining and where else can I apply them. Just tuck that away in your toolkit for something that's going to be useful later.
Absolutely. And I think it's so applicable to people wanting to do something about these problems we're facing, but not knowing what to do. And I think it's the exact same approach of like, find your thing, just do what you love and start there, because then it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like extra. It doesn't feel like something you should do. It feels like something you want to do. And I think that's the key to everybody finding a way to engage. We were recently at the Telluride Mountain Film Festival and did a big panel, and we have kind of a tagline, if you will, right now, of the world needs your story, because we really feel like it doesn't have to even come in the form of a film, but so many people are working on this, or they're struggling with this. And if we aren't talking about it, how are we going to solve it, right? Like if we aren't even talking about it. And this woman, so she raised her hand and she's like, well, she lives in Florida, and she's like, I do, I don't remember what kind of gardening, but like maybe permaculture or regenerative. I couldn't remember exactly, but she was like, I don't know. She's like, I do think my neighbors would love to know how to do this too. Like, people are always asking me questions about it and wanting to know, like, how do you grow this in the soil? And so it was like, well, could you just like put your story up on Instagram or just start telling your story? You're already doing it, but you're sharing your knowledge. And it's just such a good example of like being in line with the things that you already love to do. There's applications across the board of how to do it in a way that's additive.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of a good point of why we started this podcast as well, is because I was like, what about people who want to know just a little bit more about a lot of different things, or about even one different thing that they find on the episode, and they can listen to a 30-minute episode and be like, oh, cool. Now I have a bit of an understanding of how I could get into that field, or how I could do that, or how I could be more involved. And it is just sharing your story. And, the people who want to learn more about it will find it.
And we live in an age where it is so easy to share your story, right? I mean, most people in this country have a device in their pocket capable of getting your story to a larger audience, or even a small local audience that is impactful where you are. It really is. There's very little barrier to entry to getting your information out to the world. And I love the idea of the world needs your story, because I think that's absolutely true. And that, going back to this conversation around collaboration and bringing people together who would not otherwise sit down or take the time to sit down with each other, putting your story out there in whatever medium works for you, whether it's live storytelling, or whether it's film or media or whatever it is just critical. I mean, we can't do this without that. And to tie it into some of the more sciencey stuff that we do, it's absolutely critical to have the scientists working on the solutions. It is just as critical to get people to care about the implementation of those solutions. So an art film that has zero science content but makes somebody care about a particular ecosystem has just as much value as the scientific white paper that is documenting at a scientific level what's going on in that ecosystem, And it's two halves of the same coin. It's the knowledge and getting people to use the knowledge working together.
So, speaking of sharing stories, what is next for you and the Redford Center? Do you have any projects coming up? I'm assuming you do.
Yeah, we are, I call us a learning organization. So we're always trying to find different ways to use these stories and films as tools, particularly in the day and age we're in, where not everyone's sitting down to watch a hour and a half long show. So we're always experimenting with the short form as well, making our own, commissioning, and then grant making is a big part of what we do. We also fiscally sponsor films. So any artist that doesn't have a nonprofit connection or attached to their work, we can, as long as it's an environmental project and meets some other criteria, we can be the 501c3 home for them and support them in other ways as well. So through that work, we've over the years serviced over 100 projects, probably closer to 150 at this point. And as the world evolves and the media industry evolves and the issue changes, we started a big strategic planning process last year that we're about to complete, and we'll be kind of rolling out starting in the fall. But it's ambitious in that it looks at, it's one thing to be trying to support these films and completing and creating the supply, and it's a whole other thing to be making sure you're creating the demand and the market for them. And so this is a bigger view for us of how can we start pushing so there's more invested in these types of films and filmmakers, so that there's more opportunities for distribution and a bigger audience for them. And how can we be working with our peers in the space to build some better infrastructure for these types of projects to develop and thrive, because they're expensive, as you may know, and it's really hard to fund them. And in the way that the model that we fund, the film is part one, but the impact work is part two. So even if you can get your film done, then you have to kind of go back out and get more money and support. And we work with, as early on as we can in the projects, the artists to start helping them think about the impact they want to have, so that when they complete part one, it's not like, oh no, now what? But it's actually helping them be prepared and more likely to achieve their impact goals by starting at the earlier end of development. So, but it still means they have to raise the money and then build the plan and then execute the plan for however many years it takes. And it's a big commitment. So I just, part of this bigger ambition we have is to make sure that these films and filmmakers can really be properly resourced and are seen as valuable part of our solution set right now. We are invested $370 billion in climate infrastructure, and none of it went to arts and culture.
Right. Which is just as big, like we were just saying, it's science is how we find answers, and arts are how we get people to care about them, and I think it just kills me how often we hear the rhetoric of like, oh yeah, arts is going to be the last thing funded because it doesn't matter. We could do without arts. And it's like, no, no, you can't. And all of the emotional impact and the change in culture requires the machinery of arts to let people have a space to express their thoughts and feelings about it, and also to communicate that to people who are learning about these issues and forming their own thoughts and feelings about it. That's how you change cultures, through the arts.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue it's a cultural problem at this point, because we talk a lot about the solutions on deck to fix it. We just don't have the leadership and the courage in our leadership to take the big steps. But it needs a cultural solution to get there. That's the missing piece.
Well, and it's not funny, but it's so funny to me how, like, you have art literally all around you, but people seem to not understand if you take all of that art and like that culture and that impact that art and film and everything that goes into art. If you took all of that away, like how boring life would be. Like you don't even realize because it's just so ingrained into our culture and society that you almost don't even notice.
And it's, for me, it's what makes us human, right? It's one of the very first artifacts we have of humanity is cave paintings and artistic expressions. And it's one of the ways that we look at early hominids as closer to us than to other primates, right? Is that they're expressing in art. It's what makes us. It's how we filter and process the world.
We're going to do it anyway, right? Like we're wired to make art and express ourselves. And so this is an opportunity to do it in a way that's helpful toward solving a really big problem. More
than helpful, critical, right? We can't do it without this massive arm of it, right? It's got to be there. It's not going to work. I completely agree with that. So if somebody wanted to learn more about the Redford Center and perhaps they've got a film that they would love to pitch to you, where can we send them to learn more about your organization and some of your upcoming projects?
Yeah, redfordcenter.org. That's our website. There's a watch collection on there, about 150 projects. Not all of them are watchable online, but you can learn about them. You can watch a bunch of them, be directed out to the ones that are, commercially available right now. And would love to hear from folks. There's right now our major grant making program is in an off year. So in spring 2024, we will have another open call for anyone that has a long form, solutions forward, impact focused, environmental documentary they would like to get some support with. Those are sort of the big criteria we look for.
So start thinking up your ideas now. Have them prepped for spring 2024. It's going to be amazing. If you guys are listening and you would like to go straight to that website, go ahead and scroll down to the show notes. I've dropped the link right there so you guys can go straight from listening here to learning more about this incredible organization. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us and have this conversation with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me, and thanks for your work.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conservation Connection.
If you enjoyed our podcast, go ahead and subscribe to make sure you catch every episode that we post.
If you've got a minute to spare, leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts helps other conservation-minded people find the show. We'd really appreciate it.
A big thanks to everyone working to protect our planet, and a big thanks to you for listening. See you next time.